In this episode of the Leadership in Aviation podcast, I'm going to do a deep dive into workplace culture based on the workplace culture survey that we've completed recently at the Aviation Collective and the resulting report that we created. Of course, you can visit theaviationcollective.com to keep tabs on our latest studies, reports, and research, and of course, tips to make your workplace culture better. So I'm going to start out by targeting, or perhaps speaking to would be the better way to put this, leaders in aviation. So these are managers. Even if you're managing a small team, you're not the CEO of the company, but you have a responsibility and an opportunity to make sure that the culture and the environment that you're creating for the people who work with you and who report to you are having a great experience. And there are a couple of reasons that this is important. The first is that it's a whole lot easier to maintain good culture than it is to hire people in and have them leave, and hire people in and have them leave. Nobody ever really coming to the place where they are excelling at their job and firing on all cylinders, if you will. So what's at stake if we don't address workplace culture and people's performance in that workplace culture is that we have a revolving door. Can you imagine if you had an absolutely fantastic team that worked well together, that was incredibly productive, that always exceeded their numbers and didn't cause drama? Yes. That's what I want too, right? A strong workplace culture is one where few politics exist, where there's seldom confusion, where your best performers love their jobs and they want to stay, and you have better results quarter after quarter, even if the outside world is disrupted in some way, right? That's what I want to. So I have 3 areas where I think you can concentrate to really increase or improve your workplace culture without a ton of additional capital investment. So, of course, throwing money at something definitely helps, but here are 3 areas that I think you could have some impact and some improvement just by digging in and doing some hard work. I'm told from my coaching clients that I don't ever let anyone get away with anything. So be forewarned that I may tell you some things in this coming podcast that are hard. But when we do the hard work, we have great rewards. The first area that we can focus on to improve our workplace culture is getting clear on values. So what is the value of the company? What's its mission? Is that clear? Is the mission of the company clear to our employees, to our customers, and to the management team? Then the second area is, do we have clarity about the core values of the company? A lot of companies have something like trust or integrity. They may have prompt customer service. They may have safety or efficiency as part of their core values. And all of those things are important. Do you have core values written out? First of all. Second, are they still applicable to your business, or have they been sitting on a shelf collecting dust for the last 2 decades? Do they need to be taken out, polished off a little bit, discussed at a managerial level, and then strengthened? And then here's the key question. Can you tell me, or can you tell the people that you work with, what those values look like in practice? Does it look like this and not this? Does it look like that in practice, but what it should really look like is something totally different? So identify any gaps that you have in what actually goes on in the company and what you were hoping when you set that value up. So you may need to adjust your values, polish them up a little bit, You may need to get more clear, because to some people, integrity could mean something totally different to others. So does that look like you do what you say you're going to do, even if it's uncomfortable or costly? Or does it mean not lying? So what does it actually look like in practice, your core value? And finally, and this is a rather recent one for me, and that is thinking about your operational values. And so you may have your core values about what the character of your company is about, but are there unwritten values that perhaps you haven't been able to relay properly because you haven't spent the time writing those down? These could be, we don't spend an excess amount of money on X, Y, or Z, or we try to operate at a certain profit margin, and we make sure that we don't have expenditures that exceed that. It may be operational values like we fly first class. It doesn't matter the cost of that. So really getting clear about the operational values that your team's going to have to uphold is also important. So the first area of focus to improve your workplace culture is getting really clear about your values. The value of the company to its customers and employees, the core values that define the character of your organization, and the operational values that really dictate how you make decisions. The second area of focus is alignment. I think that as leaders, we need to be really clear on our alignment to our values. And that can be everything from workplace practices, like I just mentioned, character values. And I have a lot of coaching clients who hire for values, and then they can teach the skills. But being aligned on values is really important. Secondly, is goals. Are you aligned on your goals? Are your goals in alignment with one another, or are they in conflict with one another? And is there alignment back to your values? So are your goals aligned with each other, or do they create conflict? Are they aligned with your values, or is there conflict created there? And then I think you need to get really clear on alignment to individual contributors' KPIs. What are your expectations for each person on your team or each department within your company? And is there a way to measure that? In the workplace culture survey, we found that people are clear. Most of the people who answered the survey are clear about what their value is to the company and what their job responsibilities are to the company. But perhaps that's because we were surveying people who have very clear jobs: pilots, mechanics, dispatchers, air traffic controllers. Those people are clear about their job responsibilities because they're licensed for those job responsibilities. But where we found there was a big gap between managers and employees is in the definition of where their career path goes for advancement. They don't have a clear advancement path at their company. They aren't invested in from a professional development standpoint. And I think oftentimes it's because they don't realize that we are investing in their advancement or their professional development. Perhaps we just aren't calling it that. So aligning with KPIs, setting an expectation for growth and setting an expectation for advancement can keep us aligned with our team. So we need to have clarity on our values. We need to have clarity in our alignment with values, goals, and individual KPIs. And then we need to be clear in our communications. And I touched on this when I mentioned that people may not realize that they have access to professional development. I think we need to be clear about that. We need to communicate not only that they have access to that, but that we expect them to be growing. We expect them to be advancing. We expect them not just to be doing their job, but to be growing in their skills and the participation that they have in their job. I think so often we hire someone for a specific job, but then when we're not challenging them to do better and better, we end up thinking that they're a mediocre employee or that they really aren't going to be able to stay in that job forever as the company grows and changes. But part of that's on us because we aren't communicating to those who we lead that we really need for them to be growing and developing and setting expectations for that. I think that we need to be aware that sometimes we are managing people, kind of like we manage projects or manage flights, and we aren't really leading them. And I think that we need to be clear in our communications that we expect for them to follow our example. That's what leadership is all about. And then we have to do the hard work to make sure that we are setting the good example. We also need to be clear in communications with our management team. If there's a conflict that needs to be resolved, let's talk about it. Let's have some radical candor when people are failing in their performance. Because what I noticed from this report, and it was the most stark number that I noticed in the survey that we did, only 16% of respondents strongly agree that poor performance is addressed at their place of work. So if someone is not doing a good job, they aren't confronted about that. They aren't put on probation or on a performance improvement plan. And that can be really costly in the long run, not just because those poor performers are making mistakes and not being held accountable for that, but because of the morale of the people who are excellent performers. Those people who are noticing poor performance of their coworkers are the very ones who are more likely to leave because they feel like their entire workplace is doing poorly. So please, 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 if you take nothing else from this podcast, understand that you need to be leaning into having, setting, communicating KPIs and holding people accountable to those. That accountability is how you hang on to your highest performing employees. And finally, I think that we need to have clear communications with our customers. I think we set expectations with our customers for their satisfaction and also to protect our employees. I've probably told this story 100 times, but I love it so much. Herb Kelleher was renowned for taking good care of his employees. And I remember him telling me a story about being at the ticket counter at Southwest, where he was the founder, and having a customer treat his ticket agent poorly. And he pulled money out of his pocket, a couple $100 bills, asked the woman who was harassing his ticket agent how much she paid for her ticket, and gave her that amount of money in cash and told her to take her business somewhere else. That communication to both his employee that she was valued and to the customer that he was not going to tolerate abuse for his employees is the foundation of what makes good corporate culture at Southwest Airlines. It's an underlying principle by which they live. So just to recap, we need to be clear on our values, our core values, our missional values, and our operational values. We need to be clear in alignment to values, to goals, and to individual key performance indicators. And we need to be clear in communications with those that we lead, with our management team, and with customers. If you can do these three things, each of these three things in these three areas, I can guarantee that your workplace culture will be better You'll have spent some time, you'll have had some hard conversations, but you won't have spent a dime. In the next podcast, I'm going to talk about how employees or those who work for someone else, even if they're a manager, can improve their own workplace culture for themselves and for other people around them. I hope you'll join me then. I hope this podcast has been helpful for you today. Well, I would love for you to share it with others and follow us at the Aviation Collective on social media. You can see all of those social buttons here. You can listen to this podcast on YouTube. You can also listen to it on all of the podcast platforms. It really helps if you give it a review. And so I'd love for you to do that as well. If you're interested in more information about workplace culture, please visit my website at theaviationcollective.com and download our most recent resources.